morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's edition of the MPC Markets Morning Call, Friday, the 5th of December, 2025. Stocks are mixed overnight as investors are bracing for key PCE inflation data tonight. This will be a quick one this morning, people. There's not much in the way of massive news. Everyone's really on tenterhooks waiting for this PCE data. We are expecting up 0.2%. We had some small numbers overnight. Initial jobless claims dropped to 109,000, down 30,000, lowest since September 2022, which doesn't necessarily build a case for rate cuts. Although there are rumours floating around that President Trump has cancelled all other interviews for the Fed chair position, sort of very much fueling rumours and expectations that Kevin Hassett, who is a very dovish individual in terms of interest rates, meaning he likes lower rates, which fits in with Trump's general plan. It really added to the expectation for investors that we're going to get a low rate environment at all costs probably next year as Trump sort of stacks the Fed. I sort of had a couple of comments. It's like, well, it's only one vote, but, the chair obviously has a fair bit of influence. And if Powell actually resigns from the Fed board, not just being replaced, he can still be on the board for, but just not be chair. There's anywhere up to 4 positions that they can put on the board. So overall, I think, and if you put your chairman in place who's ultra dovish, then that's obviously going to make a huge difference. I guess the inflation problem that comes with lower rates is, that's the next president's problem. But yeah, ASX yesterday was up small. We're bang on flat for the week. The Nikkei bounced back to up 2.3%, up 1% for the week as well. The Hang Seng was up 0.7. It's flat for the week. The China A50 was up 0.43, basically flat for the week. Euro stocks up 0.32, up 1% for the week. And the US market's broadly up around about 1% for the week. The Russell being the best performer, up 1.83, half of which was last night. And, the rest of them are, around that 1% mark overall. So, we are back to strong buy territory on all the technical indicators for the Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ, and the Russell. And we're first time we've seen a strong buy in the ASX 200 for a few weeks, but only in the hourly. And then, we've still got to sell on the daily. But look, I would say tonight's figure is pretty important because we've got not only we've got the RBA next week, we've got the Fed next week, and really that's going to wrap things up leading into Christmas. There's been no talk of payrolls data coming out as yet. I haven't seen anything. So look at it, maybe they're going to push that to after Christmas and into the new year, which, we're only up to September data here at the moment. And it could be quite the deluge, in January if they sort of start to pull things back in terms of releasing those numbers. Meta was up overnight as significantly, up 3.4% on the back of announcing a 30% budget cut to the much hated metaverse project. Look, it's sort of been a bone of contention. In my opinion, probably a little bit early. Zuckerberg is built a decent business, but the investors were pretty happy with that overall. CRM after earnings was up about 3.5% to 4%. Apple up about 3.5% as well. Nvidia bid tone on the back of more talk about being able to ship H200 chips to China. There was not really any other news for anyone else, I've got to say. So looking fairly positive. There was a robotics initiative announcement last night from the Trump administration, to bring manufacturing back to the US. I would imagine, that's part of the reason Tesla's got a a mildly decent bid tone. It certainly did help a few of the robotic stocks like Teradyne, etc. As you know, there may be some of this free money that's going to the critical minerals people. It might be shared around, I suppose. Whilst we see that as a boom area over the next couple of years, and it's one of our high conviction themes, from a political standpoint, I think you're essentially funding people losing their jobs. So I'm a bit bewildered as to the rationale from a political standpoint. But it's a Donald Trump presidency, so it's fairly normal. Costco was down about 3% as well. I haven't seen any news there. I think they've got some earnings coming up very, very soon. Yeah, look, it's a fairly mixed market map. I've got to say overall. There was no major news in Intel, and it was down 7%. So I think the market's it's in a bit of a holding pattern. Some of those stocks that have been, Oracle's bounced back 3% overnight. That's just because it's been belted about 55 odd percent in recent times. For Oracle debt at the moment, because everyone's freaking out about their debt, the price of protection on their debt has stretched to its highest point since COVID, which is alarming. So those who have wanting to buy credit default swaps, essentially, are now paying away quite significantly. But I think, Micron and Intel being down overnight is probably just a reflection of them being quite well bid over the last few weeks. So it's not no major patterns here and no major corporate news. Next week, we'll have updates from Broadcom, Adobe, Oracle. Adobe might be interesting. It's much maligned as it's going to be killed by AI. It's going to be one of the big AI losers. I don't think it's going to be killed by AI. Personally, I think it's probably a fairly dramatic statement, but will be interesting to see if they've adapted, I've got to say, because they're, obviously having a flick through their company report, they've actually got growth in their AI. I mean, they're just not the popular kids. So Lululemon is Thursday, but, there's retail's been fairly solid, but that's sort of at that premium end. We've got RBA here on Tuesday, nothing expected out of that. Job openings Tuesday night in the US. FOMC decision, which is sitting around about that 90% mark or 85% mark or thereabouts for the 25 basis point cut. That's Wednesday night, Thursday morning, so it will be 6 a.m. Yeah, it'd be 6 a.m. Thursday morning with the press conference 20 minutes later. That's what it used to be. Employment here in Australia as well. On Thursday, the Aussie data is really not going to, again, it's similar to GDP, and we did have a weak GDP the other day. Look, that's kept the door, I wouldn't say open, it's kept the door ajar for rate cuts. If it was backed up by a weak employment number, which is, highly unlikely because the government just keeps hiring bloody consultants and new public servants all the time. But if we got a weak employment data, that would open the door slightly even more for rate cuts still being on the table. So, yeah, it's pretty amazing that, we got one monthly inflation data and, you've had people turn around and say that the next move is going to be a hike. We got a weak GDP data and those guys just pretty much realised how idiotic that was and drifted on back into the distance. But as I say, employment will be a big one moving forward, I would imagine, particularly if it's weak. If it's strong, just where we were at before. Silver pullback after what's been an incredible run, a couple of percent overnight. And the internet is absolutely abuzz with more conspiracy theories than you've ever seen about silver, which is to the point now where it's actually getting quite amusing. So that's probably a medium. When I say medium term top, I think that it's going to have a breather every time we get to this point, and then the conspiracy theories come out. That usually it's ring the bell. Silver tops out. Copper had a small breather as well. Platinum had a small breather, down 0.62, but still up 4% for the week. Lithium was down 3.25%, 2% for the week. And uranium's back, baby. The ETF up 5.6% overnight, up 10% for the week. And, the nuclear froth is back. So Bitcoin, again, stabilizing, down 0.66. Up 1% for the week. That's probably not a bad result for Bitcoin after, again, everyone calling Armageddon there. And yeah, so it's probably, it's a bit of a sideways week, I've got to say. A bit of a stabilization week. We need data, essentially, in the equity market's at a point at the moment where you can't buy it without some form of economic certainty. There's too much skepticism out there around the AI thematic now for there to be any form of massive bull run. We've already priced in interest rates being cut, so there's no, there's got to be something new to push this higher in the equities. I would imagine further confirmation of Kevin Hassett being appointed to the Fed should be good for gold, silver, and platinum, I would imagine, and probably copper as well, and probably Bitcoin. So those stores of value with a dovish Fed should do extraordinarily well overall. Today in Australia, we've really got, it's going to be a quiet day leading into this key US data, but there's some corporate news out there actually. Premier Investments announced a 12-month buyback of up to 100 million after they've completed the apparel brand sale to Myer earlier this year. There's a new IPO called Saluda Medical. It begins trading at 11 a.m. this morning, Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time, which is an hour after the open. They raised 231 million in the IPO, and basically it values the company at around about 775 million. I'm not even going to. It's something to do neuromodulation company. So I'm going to give myself a pat in the back there for being able to pronounce that. Don't know what neuromodulation is. Maybe I'll go and have a look at that and give you guys an update if the IPO goes well. Haven't had the greatest of track records in the last 12 months with IPOs for the ASX. Really, there's been distinct lack of interest. But if that one goes well, it probably gets index inclusion, I would imagine. At 775 million, I think the ASX 200 is about the 1.2 bill for index inclusion. So it's not that far away. But yeah, well, I guess we'll see what happens. For those of you who would like to, we've got Bulls versus Bears. Myself and Jonathan Takadena will go through the week at hand on our podcast this afternoon. The Global Alpha podcast with the young blokes Finn and Richard on Monday, and we'll be releasing our 2026 outlook next week in PDF format with the webinar in probably around in mid January. So the PDF's more, the PDF's a little bit of I wouldn't say light reading, but around the thematics and what we're looking for, and in 2026, the webinar will be much more of a actionable stock picks sort of scenario and a bit of explaining. You can go and register at mpcmarkets.com.au/webinars, and you'll get both. Have a great day, people, and a great weekend, and we will speak again Monday. General advice warning. The content presented in this presentation is intended for informational purposes only and provides general advice only. It does not take into account your personal objectives, financial situation, or specific needs. This information should not be the sole resource when making investment decisions. We strongly recommend you seek the advice of a financial professional.